Hi everybody, welcome to Paul Programs, your spot for learning about game design and game mechanics. Today, we're going to be talking about paper prototypes. Before we jump in, if you're interested in seeing more videos like this, learning more about game mechanics, let me know what kind of mechanics you want to learn about down in the comments below. And if you want to know when more videos like this drop, don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, which is somewhere down here. I'm really not too sure, honestly, anymore. They're probably going to move it anyway, so it's fine. But with that, let's get started. Today's topic is going to be an interesting one. We're going to get a little bit of arts and crafts time. And by that, I'm talking about paper prototypes. So you may be thinking, what is a paper prototype? Well, basically, it's a physical way of prototyping an app, a design, idea, game. Basically, you can do it for both digital and physical products. And really, the benefit of it is that by doing it on paper, it's a lot quicker and a lot less expensive compared to doing it in Photoshop, a design application, and especially a lot less expensive than doing it in code or building it out. With paper prototypes, you can also iterate fast, move things around, and just get something down really quickly. So, you're wondering, that's great and all. I mean, yeah, we can get data live and see how users react to it, but really, how does that help me in game design? Well, one way to think about it is, say you're actually making something like a card game, and you want to actually try it out before you actually set your rules to what they're going to be, you can create a quick prototype version and draw out your cards physically and then test it out that way. Or say you have a digital game and you want to see how it's going to work and look on a screen, you can basically create a mock-up of the screen on paper and then lay out all your different UI elements, how the player is going to actually view the character, where kind of the camera is in terms of the character relation. And you can even make them the character paper too, so then you can just take it and move it around on the page to kind of simulate that idea of what the game would look like and play like. With that actually covers how we could use it in design, but let's actually take a look at how we can actually design something with paper prototypes. Paper prototypes are our way of creating games. In this case, let's try designing a game where a player will take on enemies that appear on screen using a deck of cards. Basically, in this single player card battler, we have different components that we're going to deal with on screen at a time. And we want to first go through those. We'll have a deck. This is where all the cards for a player will live. A hand, which contains individual cards that a player may have drawn from a deck. Cards themselves, which may have certain abilities or stats. The player, which is kind of an abstract idea of everything that goes on and their stats, what they can do, what they can't do, certain rules, other things you want to show about them, like what skills they have, so on and so forth. And then last but not least would be the enemy, and this is what the players are taking on. We want to really focus on layout. Layout is really one of the key uses for paper prototyping. In this case, we have our mock-up of a tablet screen, and we've arranged our enemy to be front and center. Player would have their hands directly in front of them, deck to the right, and then UI information on the left to inform what's going on with a menu button on the right. But the important part is to make sure we have, with a paper prototype, each of these individual components we're trying to represent. So the most important things that we're actually going to create when making a paper prototype would be something to represent the enemy, something to represent each of the individual cards a user may have or use, including what they do, details, things like that. Basically, little elements to represent buttons and other UI components that we may want to move around and shift and show where they should be on the screen. The most important part is to be flexible. You're going to show users these paper prototypes, then you're going to want to get their feedback, and their feedback may end up changing how your design ends up at the end. You may not start off and end with the same exact layout and look and feel. things may change based on user input. This is a perfect example where maybe a user didn't like all the information kind of being up top and it made things feel kind of imbalanced for them. So we put more focus on the player versus the enemy by keeping them more isolated on 2/3 of the screen and leaving things like the deck and the UI components and buttons on the left side of the screen. This is just a simple idea of how we can actually make use of paper prototypes in the games we design. With that, we have basically our look at how you can actually create a game's design using a paper prototype and testing out how it looks, how it works, how it feels. And a lot of you coders out there is like, yeah, but how does this benefit me? Well, there's actually something that coders can use that allows them to basically kind of prototype or get their ideas on paper or in text quickly, and it's called pseudocoding. For those who don't know, pseudocoding is basically the way to code using regular language. So you don't have to worry about syntax, what language you're using, how to optimize the performance, things like that. It's focused more on getting the core of how something should work. And to get a better sense of how, let's actually dive into an example right now. So the designers were able to have their fun with paper prototyping, but coders, you have your tool, and that's pseudocoding. Let's talk a bit about how we could actually use it for designing a player turn in our supposed card game. And with pseudocoding, we're not worried about syntax, language features, things like that. It's mainly to get a very high-level idea of how our game should flow and function. In this case, we're going to take a look at player turns. And when a player turn begins, they'll draw a card, and that card is then added to their hand. From there, a player may choose a specific card that's in their hand, and if it's playable, it'll play in the play area. And then you have other checks. If it has an immediate action, then that action happens right at that point when the player plays the card. And then we discard the place card. After that, then the player has the opportunity to attack enemies. If it does attack an enemy and it hits, then the enemy's HP gets reduced. At that point, we'll want to check to see if the enemy has any HP left. If they don't have any HP, we remove them from the play area. And then finally, any temporary cards that may have been placed on the field that weren't immediate actions, or were from other turns or have other things, we'll discard those before we end the player's turn. As you can see, this is a simple step-by-step process of just going through what's included in a player turn. But we don't focus about coding it out as syntax, language, and all that. We put it in simple English so we can get the basic idea down and a template that we can then work off and build our main actual code and functionality. It's actually a very powerful tool for not just coders, but for anyone who's interested in building game logic, because it helps the coders see what vision you have if you're a designer or a technical designer. With that, hopefully this helps you get into prototyping in ways that you may not have thought of before, besides just paper prototypes. And with that, we've completed our look at paper prototyping with a side of pseudocoding for those interested in finding ways to try out their ideas, but may not have like the time, budget, or ability to really set something out digitally. You don't really have to. You can do it on pen and paper and just make something quick, easy that someone can see, test, kind of fiddle with it, get opinions and thoughts on it. And again, it saves you money and time because it gets pricier once you go digital. With that, hopefully you were able to learn a little bit about more game design and how you can use paper prototypes in some of your own ideas. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you all next time.